Hello, my name is Israel Lerma, and for my first ever music review, I will be covering Vince Staples' album Crybaby, his seventh studio album, which I thought was perfectly fitting for two reasons. One, being from America, this album tackles a lot of the issues and the society flaws that America kind of faces, which Vince Staples does really perfectly in his album, and he does that in a lot of different ways in these 10 songs. And two, this album is a completely different sound than what we're used to. The last three Vince Staples albums, his self-titled, Ramona Broke My Heart, and his album, perfectly titled Dark Times, really are more of an introspective writing from both happy to sad sounding songs that kind of just dig deep in his life and living in the West Coast. However, this album is completely different. It is a more punk rock-ish sounding album that is not hip hop, and Vince Staples would probably agree that this is not a hip hop record. This is not a surprise to Vince Staples. We've seen in his 2017 album, perfectly titled The Big Fish Theory, this album to Vince Staples himself, he said in a recent tweet, it was considered electronic to him. He considers that whole project electronic, which I see where he is coming from. However, his label at the time and many other places like Pitchfork consider it hip hop, forcing this artist, Vince Staples, to kind of play into this hip hop-ish sounding album, which is not giving the full liberty to the creator, being Vince Staples, which kind of sucks. And that is kind of happening in this album as well. To go into more detail on that, Vince Staples himself said, and I quote in a recent tweet, "The dummies hear a guitar and immediately start calling shit punk rock, rock, punk, post-punk, grunge, new wave, indie rock, and so on and so forth, all are different." So Vince Staples really is claiming that even though this guitar really is a lot of rock and punk sounding-ish, as we can see in his first single, Blackberry Marmalade, it goes in this whole unique sound that combines this kind of rock, grimy sound into this rap sound. It's just not that. I don't know what Vince Staples would consider this album, as we've seen in the 2017 Big Fish Theory, how he disagreed that this is not a hip-hop album. I personally don't really know what this album is. I can't even classify the genre of this album, and I feel like that's something Vince Staples kind of intentionally did. I don't think he wants to consider this album a genre. I don't think he likes to be genrefied. I think he just wants people to enjoy and listen to the music, which is what I did, and come up with my own interpretations and kind of my own likings of the album. The lead single of the album, Blackberry Marmalade, was the first song to come out, which came out also with a music video, which I would dive a little bit deep into it. I feel like it's something you can't really avoid or miss because it's really great. But just to start off with the song, I thought the guitars and the drums were quite catchy, and it really introduces, like I said, this different sort of sound that Vince Staples is not really used to, actually. Vince Staples in the past has done a lot of electronic music. He's rapped before in introspective beats and also a lot of cheery sounds. However, this album is like a different, more grimy sort of sound that Vince Staples is not really used to. But however, this song really hooks you, and the use of the guitar and the drums are quite beautiful and really heavy hitting, especially with the drums. And even the guitar's constant riffs being played do a really good job in progressing the song as a whole. And Vince Staples does a really great rapping performance and even a singing performance. Vince Staples is a really great singer, and he really shines on this album, and especially on his track with it. And being the first track, it really hooked me into what the whole album would be. Vince Staples' second verse for sure was the best one. That goes along with the music video really great, calling out the state of America. However, the third verse was quite lazy. And a lot of these verses, especially on this whole album, are really quite short, which kind of sucks. Some of these verses are literally like 6 lines, while some others are like 18. But I think if I were to average the mean, it would be like 8 bars, which there's nothing wrong with, but some of these verses just feel quite lazy. Especially this third verse. He pretty much just repeats the use of a certain word that I cannot say, and just kind of raps that over and over and over and over, and it's pretty much said throughout the whole verse. I find this quite lazy. I don't think it's really interesting in the way he says it or the way it's kind of going through the song. I mean, it fits the song, and I understand what he's going through, and the message with the music video also does a really good job in what he's saying. However, I just find it quite lazy. I don't think I hate the idea when rappers just pick one word and kind of repeat it, and that's something Vince Staples does a lot in his album. So I'm just not nitpicking a small detail. Vince Staples does a lot on his album, as we see in his last track, 7 in the Morning. He pretty much just repeats the same 2 words, basically half the song, which I think is quite stupid. However, I will give him some grace because he does it in a sort of entertaining way that has an actual meaning with it, and that's something Vince Staples isn't afraid. Every song here, as we see, will have a deep meaning and a whole reason it was made. So while I am kind of nitpicking and calling Vince Staples lazy, I do appreciate the fact that he's not just, kind of just saying it to say it. He's actually saying it with a sort of intention, and that's why I also kind of want to dig a little bit deeper or kind of discuss the music video. Blackberry Marmalade, again, was the first song released, and it came with the first ever music video, which puts you in the POV of a shooter, kind of similar to Paris, Texas music video in 2022, where it puts you in the position of a shooter for their track Superstar. And it basically, however, on this album, instead of shooting a gas station clerk in Superstar as we see in Paris, Texas, this music video actually has the shooter shoot Vince Staples in the similar POV shot, and then going into the diner and going rampage, which is quite interesting to see. With Paris, Texas, it is kind of this comedic sort of thing with this like regular show type editing. With Vince Staples, however, it is a complete 180. It is really bold, and I appreciate that because not a lot of rappers would do that, and not a lot of rappers or even artists in general kind of discuss the flaws of today society, especially in America. However, Vince Staples not only does a great job in hooking you to the music or to the music video, but it really makes a point that we see, and the whole music video, like I've said, kind of portrays this masked man who we do not see just kind of shoot everyone in the whole diner. As the music video ends, we see the shooter go back to Vince Staples' body, who is crawling for survival now, and the killer actually just finishes off Vince Staples and then kills himself. Again, this is kind of saddening to see. However, it is not impossible. We've seen this happen multiple times before, that the shooter does not want to face consequences for the action, so they kind of take the easy way out, which is kind of saddening to see. However, I'm really glad Vince Staples made this music video. It kind of brings to light, and it really shows how saddening today's society in America really is. This is the only country that undergoes this sort of racism and this sort of kind of extension of violence, which is really unnecessary in all circumstances. And I appreciate the fact that Vince Staples really made this music video also really captivating. I was pretty much hooked, and I felt like every shot really hit me here, and it was really quite deep. It felt like I was in a diner itself as a whole spectator, and I really wanted to stop everything that was going on. And I credit to Vince Staples for making me feel those emotions. But yeah, to get back to the song, the track is kind of viewed as the album's mission statement. It provides this great thesis on what this album actually is. Pitchfork themselves actually called this the sugar to the medicine because of the contents and kind of the drum bounce and the guitar buzzes that I kind of see. But the lyrics are quite violent and defiant and just kind of show everyday life, especially for African Americans going in America, in which I find quite interesting. However, this song was really written quite beautifully, like a lot of the songs we see in the project, and it really is a great introduction that Vince Staples did a really great thing, both musically and with his music video. Now with the second song, which is a new song that came out with the album, Go Go Gorilla, which, again, the guitar rhythm in this track is pretty nuts, and you will hear me saying that a lot. The guitars on this whole album are just quite perfect, and it's something you do not really see in the hip-hop world, and I'm so glad that Vince Staples kind of made this album, because this album is just quite beautiful to see, and I'm glad he is going back to his roots of exploring a whole different genre. And also something I kind of want to hint at, I guess, is that Vince Staples this album is meant to be performed live. Having this album with the live guitar and the whole drums is going to be insane to see. And I saw some videos of him at the Ray Theater, which was quite beautiful, and it really makes the music hit more. and hopefully I can see Ben Staples live if he ever does a tour. I think this whole album live would be a quite different experience, and the fact that the guitar is just going crazy, and it's just going to go even crazier and more distorted and more abrupt as the project actually goes on, which I kind of find nice. I'm always going to comment on it, but it's just really beautiful, and it's way better than the drums, even though the drums hit really deep. And this album, again, is another deep political song that explores the themes and topics such as racism and police brutality against black folks in America. Again, like how I said previously, every song here has a meaning. Every song here is made for a reason, which I appreciate, and I really love that Ben Staples is doing. Both verses here call out the injustice in living in America, and it is quite nice to see. I am not really a huge fan of the chorus here. It just does not sound catchy at all. Really, again, kind of how I previously said, just the repetition of Gorilla. And every time he says Gorilla, this is just kind of on me, but I always think of Glorilla now, and I just can't vibe with it. I just don't like it. I see kind of what he's doing. I really interpret the use of Gorilla here being about the dehumanization of black people, especially through policing. And he really gets emotional during this track, which he will in a lot of future tracks. And he talks a lot about the traffic stops, police fear, and the way people can be harmed when they are not doing anything serious or anything that actually should suffer consequences, which is kind of sad to see. But again, it is a reality that a lot of black people face and a lot of minorities face as well with the current situation that has been happening around the United States. While I didn't really like the chorus on the song, I mean, the instrumentation of the song is just quite beautiful, and it is really interesting to see the lyrics about police violence and fear. And this is, again, the biggest conflict that is constantly repeated throughout the album. And a lot of people and critics are kind of connecting this also to redlining, incarceration, and police violence, as we see. Again, I mean, this song is pretty good. The instrumentation of the song with the drums and the guitars are really quite nice. Ben Staples really, again, does a good performance with his delivery and his songwriting. This whole songwriting throughout this album, especially the song, is quite beautiful. Again, every word is set for a meaning, and using Gorilla as, while it might just seem to someone else as just the word gorilla, it actually has a whole deeper meaning that a lot of critics are also connecting to redlining and incarceration. And that's something Ben Staples, again, did for a reason. And he really spent a lot of time with preparing and writing this album. And this song is a great example of that. And this song is quite good. It's not better than Blackberry Marmalade. However, it is a great second track for the album, and it does a really good job introducing the third track, which is White Flag. Again, the guitars on these songs are just so catchy and nasty. The guitar started off the song with the drums coming in. Then Ben Staples at the 17-second mark comes in with the "Sometimes love can turn to war. I've seen it all before." And even though those two lines are just so simple, they're just so beautiful to me. And it's just it really got me emotional, and it really made me think about, it really made me think about the act of just war in general. And that's something Ben Staples does with this song. It highlights the connection of love and change to society, and the act of just kind of surrendering with it. And it also brings up the fact, can society even change? We see again in the scores, Ben Staples is really emotional with it, and he just doesn't want to fight anymore. Hence the reference and the painting of the white flag in the music video, but also the most obvious one is in the title of the song. For those who are unfamiliar with what a white flag means, a white flag basically just means a symbol of surrendering and giving up. And he knows today's change in America is practically draining. While there is a lot of change politically and there's a lot of innovation going on, especially with technology, a lot of societal issues that a lot of minorities face are never changing. And this has been ongoing for over 100 years, which is really sad to see. And it kind of makes Ben Staples worry. And we see his last lines of the last verse and the bridge. He knows who to love. He knows how to love. He knows why to love. But it is so draining, and he does not have the time for it anymore in this American society. We see in the music video a white flag being However, the white flag is actually being painted by Vince Staples himself. He actually paints over the American flag to be completely white, and then he actually lets out a whole round of bullets on the flag itself, which is really, really nice to see. And it just shows Vince Staples kind of giving up on America. While America in the United States does a really good job in providing some opportunities, and the hope of the American dream is always going to be there, it just, with the constant issues and the change, especially with the societal issues that minorities face, it has made a lot of people give up, and it has made a lot of people lose hope, which is a sad thing to see. And this is kind of a reference that Ben Staples is showing. While does Ben Staples feel like this? I am kind of unsure. However, I am glad he's bringing up to light that a lot of people now are really, really hopeless, and we see in a future song, Ben Staples brings up the idea of a revolution, which is interesting. And however, in this song, he is kind of showing the loss of hope and how draining society really is, and just living in America. To get back to the song, it really has like this 50s, 60s feel. It's really chill and easy to listen to, for sure more accessible than the last two songs. And has like this rock influence, like this obvious rock influence that's like really subtle and not overwhelming. So if you don't really like the idea of rock, this song, while it does have that influence, it's not that strong, and I recommend you really listen to it. Again, getting back to the lyrics, it really dives deep into the fact of being exhausted and just being drained. The line, "I don't want to fight no more," again, is really important to Ben Staples and one of my personal favorites, because it comes right after the last two tracks that kind of deal with the police violence and whole political despair with the African American community, which is just kind of the fact that he put the song after them too is a great decision, and I'm glad he did. And to get back to the music video a little bit, there really is two meanings with it. It kind of shows Ben Staples himself being tired of the fighting and kind of confused on who to love and why, but it also shows an open rebellion against American symbols, and something we really should not pride ourselves for, which Ben Staples shows with the idea of him shooting the actual flag himself. Now with The Running Man, which is the fourth track on the album, it pays kind of reference to a 1987 film that is basically a dystopian film that shows participants being portrayed in a negative light by the government. They kind of use their footage and portraying them as heinous criminals, and the government as basically heroic champions, even though they're just assassins. And beyond this propaganda, the game is pretty much rigged for the contestants to always lose, and the government's always going to be shown in a good light. And to kind of start with the song, it takes a more different kind of take. He's kind of, in a second verse, Ben Staples hints that he feels abandoned by actually God and Christianity, implying that God wasn't there when he needed him, which is kind of empowering and sad to see that he's kind of going on his religious take that I did not expect to see. The bass line in the song is beautiful. It is probably the star of the song, while everything else and Benz himself does a great job. The bass line really hits, and it feels really dark and heavy, like in a Doom soundtrack, and it really is probably one of my favorites and my favorite use of an instrument in this whole album. This song, it is actually lyrically written really, really beautiful, and it really shows this introspective sounds that I'm used to from Ben Staples with Dark Times and Ramona Broke My Heart. It really dives deep into a lot of the pain, grief, and isolation, and being just emotionally and mentally trapped. He focuses on a lot of lines of religion, hell, and therapy, and just being alone with his thoughts, and kind of even considering music itself as a nightmare. And it really shows the Running Man, and Ben Staples kind of shows himself as the Running Man. It really shows that Benz is kind of running from himself, his past, and really his emotions throughout this whole song, as we see with the content that's actually being said by Ben Staples himself, followed by this distorted, again, heavy bass that really sounds frightening, and it just kind of shows what's going on in Ben Staples' head. And I give him really, really great credit for putting us in that scenario. It really feels like we are feeling the same emotions that Ben Staples himself is feeling. Now with the fifth song, TV Guide, it actually goes sort of a different route, but really similar to the issues that are currently being talked about. Again, it starts with an even more extremely loud and distorted guitar, but now goes into this different direction with television, actually. And in TV Guide, Vince kind of uses television as a symbol for the mass media ability to manipulate and commodify people, especially Black Americans, and warn us about the passive conceptions of TV that really shape our worldview. We saw in the first music video how the man was just on his phone, kind of, trapped in, probably being fed information through a lot of these news sites that really do not do a good job in kind of showing and portraying the whole story. And this is kind of something we see in further detail in TV Guide, which is quite interesting to see, especially since Vince actually has a history with TV. He had his own show, The Vince Staples Show, that came out on Netflix, which is similar to Atlanta's FX. However, Vince Staples Show was actually canceled after 2 seasons, compared to Atlanta, which had 4 successful seasons and is critically acclaimed as one of the best television shows. So it is really interesting to see Vince Staples kind of addressing TV and kind of the use of it, even though he had his own TV show. Throughout the whole song, it's kind of ironic to see how he shames the television, but one thing we need to understand, he's not really shaming the shows themselves. He's not shaming the entertaining aspect. While we are consumed by it, we can learn a lot from television, as we see in the Vince Staples Show. The Vince Staples Show is kind of similar to this album, really dives deep into a lot of these issues. Same thing with Atlanta's FX with Donald Glover. He did a pretty good job portraying and inspiring Vince Staples to actually, in my opinion, kind of do this. And it's not the television itself. Again, it really pretty much is the news. Vince Staples does not drop any names. However, he does drop some kind of controversy and kind of the effects that the news kind of does, feeding false information and kind of hiding the truth from a lot of things that we see in everyday society. And we've seen this again for the past 20 years, and it kind of is hopeless with even getting source change. He ends this verse with some bars, and he kind of just uses the reference of ass constantly over and over, and he's basically saying if you have some sort of leverage or skill, you should use it before you get used. I think it's okay. I'm gonna critique this. I don't really like what he's saying, but I understand what he's trying to say. He's pretty much just saying if you have some sort of strength and skill, please do not get used by anyone else. You are a nice person. You have something within you, and you can use those skills to get to a higher place. However, if you don't, or if you do it in not so smart tactical way, you will most likely get used, which is kind of interesting to see. And it's kind of obvious. However, I'm glad he's kind of pointing it out. I don't like the fact that he kind of used ass to kind of like fit into today's generation and kind of, everyone's vocabulary, but I respect what he's saying. And also the use of the constant repeated words is I'm just not a fan of. I don't know. I feel like it could have just been written kind of better. However, I will give him some credit on this time, because the television chorus, while it does kind of use the word television over and over, and it's kind of similar to Tauren Moy's Postman, it does it quite nicely, because this time there's actual proper pauses and pitches and filters that make this kind of really work, and it kind of makes it really pop. So I will give him credit, because the chorus on the song is done quite nicely. I also just really like the concept of this song itself. While it is kind of a different thing, I really like the fact that this song was actually titled TV Guide, because not only does it provide a great introduction of what the song is about. The TV Guide actually used to be a book where you can kind of find what the channels are going to be on. However, I like to think that the TV Guide on this actually is a reference to the TV actually guiding to your thoughts, to your beliefs, and kind of what you should care about, which I find really interesting. And it really makes you wonder, especially the lyrics, when Vince Staples says, "What are you looking at?" in this sort of aggressive sort of way. It kind of makes us question, like, why are we watching this? Why are we letting it shape us? We are more than that. We need to understand that this is being phrased in a specific way, and we need to make our own judgment and opinions, which is really, really nice and really clever, Vince. I also really like the box, like, in sound of the song. It really makes this whole song feel like this closed mind, and it really connects to the sort of like echo chambers and like internet opinions that we always see in Instagram comments and just even Twitter, of how people can really reinforce what they already believe without challenging themselves. We know the human mind does not like we know the human mind actually just likes to confirm our own beliefs. So now the fact that we have kind of the news kind of just sticking into this one lane and everyone agreeing to what they want to kind of show, it is kind of sad to see, because it really just reinforces and guides our behavior to this sort of specific way that the media should not never do. And that just really goes against the basic journalism that is kind of counteracted and never shown in today's society. Now with The Big Bad Wolf, it's a really interesting song in a lot of ways. One, it has a sample, Slick Rick's Children's Story, which was sampled by Nas in 2018. And this sample is used like a conversation. There is a lot to dissect in a song when it comes to content matter, but it is probably best if you listen to it yourself. And also the sample does a lot of great job and has a deeper meaning than most people think. And the grooves of the song are really quite nice. And again, the pacing of the sample is pretty good. But yeah, this song really is bold and is the most deliberate, and it really shows the most emotional side with Vince. And the reason why I said the song's really different is that there's only rap verses in the song, and the use of the sample as well. There is no chorus, there is no bridge, there is no singing. It's just only raps. And when Ben Staples raps on a song, it is quite emotional and really fast, and he pretty much explains it all and isn't afraid to show, the conflicts that he is going through. Now, to get a little to the song, it has a great beat. It has really good lyrics that talks about the whitewashed image of Jesus and police and law violence again. And it has this good sample cut, like I previously said, with Slick Rick, that really does a good job in delivering the purpose of the song. However, the rapping is just okay to me. It's not my cup of tea. It's not my forte. I might be a bit biased because I was raised in the 2010s. However, this song really pays homage into the NWA and the Slick Rick style of like truth telling and this specific one type of flow, which I am not a huge fan of. However, I respect Vince for paying homage because it's the most obvious way to kind of get your point across. I am just not a fan of the raps on the song, and I felt like at a certain point it was just too fast and it just didn't feel like the emotion was there from the previous songs. Only in America is the 7th track of the album, where Vince condemns the glorification of the USA. Since its conception, the USA has really prided itself being the pillar of free speech, liberty, and freedom. The fact the American dream is up there. However, in modern times, American ideals have been shown to be really untrue and hypocritical, and a lot of the truth is being missheld, and people, like he said in TB Guide, are being guided in sort of one way of thinking. The treatment of Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, and pretty much every minority in America has been the main failure of America's supposed ambitious progressive ideals with the idea of freedom of speech. The chorus does a good job. It plays with the hymn God Bless USA. To quote, "You can live by the gun, die by the gun, only in America. You can lie, you can steal, house on a hill, only in America. You can be anything, live your dreams, only in America," which is, I don't like the use of repetition. However, I will appreciate because he did it in a simple, clear way this time. Also, the use of red, white, and blue and the color patterns of fireworks 4th of July are really monuments to think in America, celebrating the independence of 1776. However, something that I never noticed, and something Ben Staples easily points out, is that these colors and the colors of basically the American flag are actually the police sirens, which is a really nice touch and is something I will always remember, that leads to this bold pre-chorus where Ben states, "Stole me and they brought me to the USA. Thank you, I guess." And this is a really interesting bar that can be interpreted in different ways. I don't really know what to make of it. However, I really wanted to point out and kind of want to hear everyone else's opinions. To me, it just kind of shows I've kind of talked about this before, the surfer's pride and the opportunity that America has. However, there's a lot of regret and a lot of despair living in America, especially with a lot of the flaws that, again, Ben Staples has said. However, let me know what you guys think. I think this is a really interesting line, and I feel like this is something that really needs to be talked about more. A lot of people, especially myself, I am kind of glad I am living in America. However, it's one of those things where, am I really grateful for being here? Am I really thankful for being here? I mean, it's like one of those things where I'm like, I guess, and I'm glad kind of Ben Staples said that because it makes me really reflect on my status of just living in America. Do You Know the Devil is the 8 track of the album, and it dives a little bit deeper into something us, not musicians, or not something we're not familiar with, and that's actually kind of like signing a record deal or to other people and a lot of artists. It's kind of signing a deal with the devil, because once you sign on that deal, it is kind of, you're really pretty much doing the devil's tango, and hopefully you got a good contract, because how Ben Staples said previously in recent news, he actually did not like his record deal back in 2015 and 2018. He thought he was kind of stuck and he didn't really have creative freedom, especially when it came to the Big Fish theory, and he hated the fact that he never had the liberty to actually express who he is. And once you're in this devil's tango, it's really hard to get out. The only artist I know that's probably successfully gotten out is the Frank Ocean story, but even then Frank Ocean released a great project that accompanied it. However, it was technically just to get out of his record label that's not even on streaming services. But again, this is something a lot of musicians face and not the common man faces, which is kind of saddening to see. And this has started from even the 90s, from Prince to even now with Ben Staples, Frank Oceans, and just multiple artists, especially in hip hop, where a lot of people are really eager to sign record labels to make sure their family gets into a safe place. And again, this is something we can't really relate to, which kind of makes me not really like the song, but something we kind of understand is the world is getting worse, as Ben Staples has said, and the more it does, the more hopeless you get, like how Ben has said, and the stronger the strength of the devil will be under Ben's. The chorus of the song is just extremely lazy. Like, it really is just the word hell over and over and over, and it really is just hoping it lands. However, it's hard to relate or even have fun with the song, because the use of the word hell itself is like and then not even being a relatable track, for us people who are not even musicians. It's like, okay, we understand where you're coming from, Vince, but I can't really relate to this. Even the verses were just okay. For me, it was really hard to distinguish what he was trying to say again, and the fast pace of the song does not really help him. It probably would have been better if it was slow. It probably would have been better if it was slow. I feel like that would have just fit more of the devil and the hell vibe he was trying to go for. I will give him credit. The guitar that comes in the last minute of a song with this solo, pretty sick solo, that sounds really dark and atmospheric. It really does sound like you're in hell, pretty much saves it, and the rhythms were hitting. But other than that, the song was okay. This is probably like my second least favorite song of the album. I do want to point out, I really like the baby crying in the background, and the devil imagery. It really does make us feel like we're on Vince's shoulders, as he's gotten screwed over before. It really shows us his like thoughts and demons, and the line of selling your soul with these record labels. It is this big controversy with selling your soul. We know that for a fact. A lot of rappers and even just artists in general regret what they done signing that paper. However, to others, it has done really great to them and has given them a good source of wealth that they really, really like. It really just all depends on what kind of contract you get into. So that's something you kind of be really worried about. But I will give him credit. I really like these combinations of like this emotional rawness and like this religious imagery of the devil, being portrayed in music. However, it really is kind of, I guess, what's the word? It's overdone now. It's just overdone now, but I will give him credit. I think it's kind of beautiful to have this sort of, emotional rawness with it, and I can't hate, Ben Staples was screwed over his record label, and even with his show being canceled, he was pretty much, in my opinion, he was kind of screwed in getting another season. However, it's just the unfortunate truth, and it just kind of sucks because I can't really relate to this. However, the religious imagery and the commentary on this one was, it alarms you to be careful with whatever contract you sign. So I think that was pretty nice, and it's a nice shift to another topic that is pretty important, especially for hip-hop artists who want to quickly sign and get, their sort of wealth to buy whatever they want quickly. Now with the 9th track of the album, we have Cotton, which actually was the 3rd single released, surprisingly, but it also has its own music video. I don't appreciate the fact that Ben Staples released 3 singles before the album. I think that's kind of weird. I mean, it's called a single for a reason. We've seen A$AP Rocky's Don't Be Dumb, Don Toliver Octane, even Kanye West's Bully. They pretty much only had 1 single in these like 15 plus track albums. However, this album had 3 out of 10, which is literally 1/3 or 1/3 of the album, which is kind of weird. However, it did have the music videos to accompany it, so I will cut him some slack. I'm just not a fan of the fact that you're putting out 1/3 of the album before it actually officially comes out. However, this music video, again, is quite nice, and one thing I forgot to mention, and I'm pretty sure the reason why he did this like 3-track singles was that the fact that these music videos are actually connected in its own world. In a second music video, I forgot to mention, but the American flag that is painted over white and white flag was actually showed in the shooter's behind the shooter's truck, which is a really nice touch, and it kind of it makes us inference or speculate the race or the gender of who the shooter was, but I cannot confirm or say anything. We still don't know. However, it's really interesting that the flag that was used in Blackberry Marmalade in that gruesome sad video was actually used in Ben Staples in the second video, being White Flag. And when the white flag is shot by Ben Staples himself, it actually is kind of like this background / like layover, I don't really know how to explain it, that we see in the music video Cotton. So while we see this like montage of what Ben Staples is displaying, the white flag is actually like in the background. It's like this sort of like transparent thing, which is a pretty cool touch, and it's like connecting all these 3 videos, which is really dope. And that's something I didn't notice until I actually like went on Reddit and saw, which is a really nice touch that kind of connects these videos, and it kind of shows like the chronological order of the album, with it being the first, third, and the 9th track. Again, this song is probably the catchiest and the grooviest. The use of the piano is really nice that we haven't seen before. The guitar, again, is quite good. The song works really well, and the title track being Cotton is the obvious reference to slavery, the South, and American history. But it's also about the music itself. The biggest interpretation here is the Dance For Me part, which sounds fun on purpose, but it really feels dark with the way Ben says it. Feels like there's a double meaning. Music picks Ben up when he's falling down. It's a way to cope. Music is therapy. However, it sort of feels like the industry and the audience and even America itself is telling Ben to kind of perform for a product and kind of just entertain them. Pitchfork said it kind of perfectly. They considered the song Cotton as a homage or a reference to capitalism, showing Ben's labor performance. While fun, it's just showing his pain become a product, which is really sad to see. With the last track of the album, we have 7 in the Morning. I am unsure what 7 in the morning means to Vince. I am assuming that's when he wakes up. I'm assuming that's when America wakes up for their 9 to 5. Maybe there's a hidden military time or a battle that happened at this time that I'm unsure of. But this song kind of dives deep into military, which is pretty neat, especially with the current battles we have seen in America right now. I think the chorus on a song, it is quite lazy, but I will give him credit because it's nice delivery and he does it really fun in this sort of fun way. And basically why I'm calling the chorus quite lazy on this one, he literally just repeats left, right, and left. That basically sounds like soldiers aimlessly following their movements and their commands, which is later confirmed in the next verse, thankfully. While it is quite lazy, I will give him credit because it is kind of a neat thing that I think only Ben Staples could really execute. The last verse is probably the best. It kind of discusses why is war here? What is it good for? Why pride our own gladiators, our own soldiers, in winning when we can actually just have peace within each other and as a world, and which is really nice and sweet to think about. Again, like this song has made me actually reflect and sit down and made me wonder why not just America, but countries over the world, why we get ourselves into these battles, and not even just these large-scale battles, but even our own interpersonal battles that we have with relationship and family. Why must we fight? Why must we pride ourselves when we can really just have peace and live correspondingly with each other? And again, Vince, I think this was perfectly written. I think you're one of the best writers, and I appreciate this song. It is quite beautiful and is a really great track to end off with, especially in today's world. The instrumentals on the song are really, really nice. That like whistle sounding synthy key was quite nice. I don't really know what it was, but it's such a nice touch that kept me like awake, and it really fits the like military vibe that it's going. The last slow guitar solo in the last minute sounded really good, and I really like the fact that he ended it with that. It was a really good way to close the album. It goes from the personal pain and the struggles of the African American community to now American racism and the depths of war, why we do it, and the whole overall global violence that really should not be prided upon, and that we really should not partake in. Vince really lets people soak in with this sort of heaviness, and while it is a sad way to end the album, I think it's a really beautiful way that makes us think why we even have this sort of balance. Again, it closes the album as a great way that drives from America's internal balance to this sort of global war that really shouldn't be the case. I think this album was great. I think this album was beautiful. I think Ben Staples made it clear with what he was fighting for, with what he wants to be done, what issues must be addressed. And I feel like that's something that needs, as a whole American society, we need to understand. I thought this album was pretty good. It really has a deeper meaning that makes us wonder, our pride of living in America. While it is a great place for opportunity, and again, the American dream is potentially a thing, there are a lot of struggles and flaws with living in the States that really aren't addressed, and a lot of guidance are making us really close-minded, and we are not really thinking of a lot of the issues and a lot of the struggles that a lot of minorities and a lot of people face here. And a lot of these issues that Ben Staples has said are not being solved at any moment. It feels like there are no progress. These issues have been ongoing for many, many years. However, it just feels like it's getting worse with the innovation of technology and the sudden political changes, and the more battles and wars we have seen, and the economy really not going on a good pace, which is really sad to see. However, I am really glad Ben Staples kind of took this political stance with a different sort of sound. I think he really did get the job done. I respect him more as an artist now. And just some few closing thoughts on the album. I thought this album was great. He went with a completely different sound that we've never heard before. He went away from the hip-hop sound we've seen in the last 3 tracks. He went away from the cheery vibe. He went away from the electronic music we've seen in the Big Fish theory. It's like almost he went back to his roots with Summertime '06. However, this time, instead of speaking for himself, he's actually speaking for a whole community, being the African American community in America, which I really find kind of beautiful. We've seen in the last 3 albums, Ben Staples just really talked about himself, but he's kind of changed that with a show. And now with this album, it gives a proper stance musically to kind of portray what he wants to really say. To get back to it musically, I thought the use of the guitar was great. I was getting kind of worried that it was going to be this sort of repeat of just having the guitar, drums, and then Ben Staples coming in. However, it changed up, and every song was kind of different past the 3rd track, which is something I appreciate. But again, the use of guitar was quite beautiful. The solos were really nice. The drums were hitting. The snares were really nice. They gave like this West Coast sound vibe. The use of the piano and like the other miscellaneous instruments in every other song was quite nice. The use of the sound effects of the babies crying and dogs barking were pretty cool, and it gave like a nice layered touch. And it was just really delivered really, really nicely. And the songwriting on this album was for sure Ben Staples' best. And I feel like the reason why was that Ben Staples was not just writing for himself here. He was writing for a whole community that made him really sit down and think about the words he was putting on paper when writing his album, which is something really nice. And man, the songwriting on this album, while I did find a little bit of laziness in it, it probably is for sure the best written, and it makes you really think and reflect on some of the ideas and concepts that were being thrown out. And it made me really ponder and kind of think about, am I even glad to be in America? Am I even happy to be here? Which is something I never really thought of. And to Ben Staples, he did a really good job with that. And when it comes to replay value of the album, I thought it's okay. I I don't know the next time I will listen to this album, quite honestly. I feel like this album you have to be in the mood to listen to, which there's nothing wrong with. However, I mean, casual listening to these songs are kind of hard. I feel like there's only 2 songs on his album I'll actually like replay like consistently compared to his previous albums, Dark Times and Ramona Broke My Heart, where every song is pretty much a banger, easy to listen to, fun to listen to, even though it has this dark feeling. But it's really nice to listen to what just Ben's is saying. But with this album, it's like, it's kind of harder. It's not Ben's fault. I might be kind of biased because hip hop is my favorite genre, and this is a different sound. However, I just think the replay value kind of lacked here. I also do kind of want to say, while the songwriting on these, and the songwriting, the concept matter, and the lyricism was literally the best for sure. The delivery was kind of just okay. It was just okay. I think it could have been done better in some songs. In most songs, it was great. It was perfect, as we see in Blackberry Marmalade, 7 in the Morning, Go Go Gorilla, The Running Man. Like it was great. But some other songs, it just kind of lacked, especially for like Children's Song and TV Guide. It was just like okay, and I wasn't a huge fan of the delivery on some of them songs. It could have just been done better, or maybe just bring a feature in to kind of help with that as well. I think that would have been cool, or maybe the use of an interlude or another sort of sample to kind of introduce what you want to talk about would have been better. But this album, pretty much, while there is kind of like a cohesive story, it really kind of is hard to dissect and understand it as a casual listener if you're not sitting down and actually digesting everything. It feels like the story and the meaning is there. However, it's kind of hard to understand, especially with tracks like TV Guide and I'm blanking on the name here. Like tracks like TV Guide and Do You Know the Devil being like placed there. It felt like kind of filler tracks that kind of killed the momentum. And then we have like 7 in the Morning, which is like this global sort of crisis track in the end, which is nice. But it's like, how did we get? It makes us question like how we got here, which a viewer or a listener shouldn't have to question that, which I really wasn't a fan of. I just thought the track listing could have been better, or it just would have been benefited more with just like more direct explanation or an interlude or even just a feature to kind of help, or even a sample. I think Ben's could have done a way better part with that. This album was 35 minutes with 10 songs. I brought this up before. I hate the idea that he released 3 songs before. I think that's kind of stupid. He should have stuck with 2 max. I understand he had the music videos to complement them, but I just don't think that was a good idea. I think he should have probably held one of them out. Probably Cotton, and have everyone listen to it at the same time with the music video dropping on the same day, but he didn't do that, and it kind of surprised me he didn't do that. Also, the songs, like the track list and the length, I have no complaints with it. Maybe because he dropped 3, I feel like he should have added 2 more songs. I know there's one song called Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's only on vinyl, which I'm not going to be reviewing because I don't have vinyl. But I think it would have just benefited more with about 2-3 more songs. I think it would have been far, far greater. If I were to rate this album out of 10, I would probably give it a strong 7 to a light 8. I thought this album was pretty good. The songwriting on this album was great. The instruments were great. It could have been slightly better or more entertaining to listen to instead of just relying on the heavy use of the guitar and the use of the drums. There really wasn't a great bass with the exception of that one song, and the use of the piano and miscellaneous instruments were pretty good, but that was pretty much it. I thought it could have been slightly better with a mixed change up of sound. The songwriting was top tier, most likely his best songwriting that I've seen from Ben Staples and many other rappers in the last 5 years. However, the delivery just could have been better, more entertaining, and this album really lacks a lot of replay value compared to, in my opinion, his 2 best albums, The Big Fish Theory and Dark Times.